Good afternoon. I want to call to order the Police Facility Oversight Committee, July 24th, 2023, in the Jeannie Seelig Room. Next on the agenda, I'd like to do introductions. I am Jim Wheeler. I'm the chair of the committee. I'm also the District 4 Alder for the city of Fitchburg. Go to my right here.
Rosa Aguilu, I'm a retired police officer from Madison, and I was a member of the Police and Fire Commission in Fitchburg for 5 years.
I'm Paul Woodard, the senior engineer with the Public Works Department, overseeing the management of the design of the project.
Al Morales, Chief of Fitchburg PD.
Jared McDaniel with Pepper Construction, providing construction management advisory services.
My name is Brian Mead. I'm an architect with FGM Architects, design principal and programmer.
I'm Andrew Mayo, also from FGM Architects. I'm the project manager for the project.
Andy Potts. I'm a former alder, District 1 for about 10 years, still active with a couple committees in the city, and then my day job I'm in the state budget office. I'm a manager on criminal justice issues.
Line host, patrol officer, Fitchburg Police.
Is anyone along the wall for the committee? No, just watching? Okay, thank you. All right. Why don't we go to number 3, talk about projects, goals, and expectations. Confirm the goals set by staff and police team align with committee goals. Who's going to take the lead on this one?
Brian or Andrew?
Okay. Just looking at all right, so there were really 5 primary goals that came out of us as the architect meeting with the police department. A big one that kind of rose to the top was, at this point in the 21st century, with the 21st century policing model that Chief is trying to instill in the department, they really need a purpose-built police station. So thinking about all of the different specific spaces that go into a modern police station, be intentional with how those all fit together, so that operationally they're more successful. Another one was the overall design aesthetic, making sure that it fits in with the Fitchburg Center campus, not only with the municipal campus, but also with the greater surroundings of the Fitchburg Center development. Chief has been very big on community partnerships, making sure that this isn't just a police department, but it's really more of a service facility that they just happen to occupy, but it's really community forward. Recruitment and retention from an internal perspective, being able to bring potential recruits in to say, here's where you'll be working every day, and giving them pride of place, as well as retaining those existing on the force and making sure that their workspace is adequate. And then I think that covers the big overarching goals. Chief, was there anything that I missed?
No.
Okay. Yeah, so those are the primary goals of the project. Some of them more aspirational, others more specific to a facility itself.
So sorry to interrupt. One piece is the accreditation piece, things that fall through the accreditation standards. Sorry.
Any questions from the committee of what your goals or what you thought your goals were for the police facility?
Put me on the spot.
I would just like to hear more when you say a purpose-built police station. I'd like to hear a little bit more information on what that looks like or what the chief is thinking about.
Sure. Would you like me to start? Or?
Go ahead. You seem like you have something to say, so.
No, the purpose-built building is a police station. It's very unique. It's not office space. It's not just a building to say we need office space for this. A police station has to have things that are unique to a police station. And I often say if you build it once, it'll last a long time because the skeleton will always be there. In other words, you need an area for to unload and offload detainees. You need a secure area to house the vehicles. You need an area for command staff, an area for patrol, an area for investigations. You need an area for safely inventorying and processing evidence. You need an area for communications. You need, and I'm missing some of the other things that are there, interrogation or interview rooms, and 21st century policing, the sixth pillar, which is officer wellness. You now have the officer wellness area, and now it's a multi-purpose room for anywhere from having a meeting with a police chaplain, psychologist, to area for lactation and child rearing needs. So you built it, and when I say if you built it right the first time, it will last. If you go to some of the bigger cities that have constructed a building, some of them are going, some of these police stations are going on up to 100 years old, and they have the basics. You remodel and you continue to use that structure. And many of the cities where they built the space for police, they're not conducive to police style work. And I'll use this building as one of the examples. This building was built to hold a police station, but it wasn't built to be a police station. And some of the things that you have that you don't have in this building are the examples that I gave. For example, the area to a site that was missed was to safely unload and load detainees. By not having it, you become a risk for accreditation. In other words, in law enforcement, it's called a sally port. If you don't have an area to unload a prisoner safely and cause a ability for a prisoner to escape, that becomes a liability on the city. Hence, not to insult anybody's intelligence here, but accreditation standards are standards that you maintain to reduce that risk, hence reduce costs in insurance. So that's what the ultimate goal is for accreditation, is reduce your insurance costs through workman's comp, through lawsuits for something happening where they weren't, where you didn't do things according to standards, and there's multi-levels. One of those levels is building, the building itself, the securing of property and maintaining the security of that property and handling that property evidence safely are things that fall under accreditation. Those pieces alone here for the current police facility, the police area, I won't call it a facility, but the police area for Fitchburg would not meet accreditation standards. And if you're going to build a police facility, you need to keep those things in sight, in light to proceed.
Anyone else?
Did you mention, maybe you didn't, I was thinking of something else, for the training?
Yes, absolutely, and we discussed a lot that further, but you're 100% right. Another part of 21st century policing, and the pillar, I forgot which pillar, I think it is still consistent, the sixth pillar, is the training of law enforcement. The accountability that falls on law enforcement is probably one of the highest accountability. The profession is one of that's held to a high standard, which means constant mandates of training, not just in your minimum 40-hour basic certification standards, but standards to maintain above that in other areas of specialty within law enforcement, which means you're constantly coming up on training needs. To have an area within the facility helps in meeting those needs and you applying staffing to apply the staffing needs and apply the training needs in the building, which means you're going to have some type of training abilities within that facility.
Also a question, is the goal with regards to training to continue to share or use Madison facilities? Or
We would hope that we could not to have our own, simply because Dane County all wait in line to use either Dane County training facilities or Madison training facilities, which means we're at the beck and call to their availability. To have it, some of those things here will allow our staffing levels to allow us to apply our staffing levels and our training needs at a more accommodating manner.
And we're talking about classroom training, or are we also referring to a shooting range, or no?
Yes.
Both.
Yes.
As well as defense and arrest tactics.
Defense and arrest tactic, and the way the FGM is projecting that is to have hybrids of certain rooms so they can be used for multifunction for cost savings.
And I agree pretty much with the chief. I retired a captain from Madison Police after 28 years. And, you know, some of the things that, pretty much all the things that the chief had mentioned. And, you know, my goal is to build it right the first time. Because after it's built, you know, we can't, it's going to be expensive to go back. And there's a lot of things to consider, especially those high liability issues like the chief was saying. When you're talking evidence, you're talking drugs, money, and guns, and that stuff has to be tightly controlled. Also, when you're talking evidence, you're talking about making sure they have the right fume hoods in the evidence room so officers aren't passing out, you know, from drugs. And the reason I bring that up is because it is expensive. That stuff is very expensive. So, you know, I want to make sure that the officers have what they need in order to be effective. And I'm going to lay my cards on the table. The one thing that I'm really going to be looking at, and this is cost-saving measures, is the shooting range. You know, and I would like to hear a lot more on like who's gonna be available to use it. Because Madison has one, Dane County has an outdoor one. So, you know, I don't want to go that route if we still could use, you know, those ranges. I agree with the chief about the DAT room, you know, probably want a FATS room and everything else in there in order to do training, defense, and arrest tactics. And those rooms, especially for Madison, when I left, Madison training facility does fill up quick. You're talking about probably you got to have your dates in a year in advance. Because then the Madison put their dates in because they still got to use the facility also. So that's where I'm coming from as far as where this police facility is concerned. I mean, because we do have to worry about costs. I mean, it's I heard the initial estimates, but I think it's going to just cost a lot more, you know, as far as, but I'm willing to listen. That's just my belief.
Just to, again, it's not just that they're available, it's like they're not available because we have to wait for those pieces, but it's also traveling from, you know, one side of town to get here. And if it's a half day, now it's almost like a full day because you're going over there to do the training to come back, especially over by Wanakee for the outdoor range. The secondary piece is we're spending $12,000 a year for staff, current staff, in utilizing those facilities. So that's what we pay. We pay Dane County over $6,000 per training facility needs, and we pay Madison over $6,000 for training facility needs. And that's for the staffing we have now, projected 20 years. As the staff grows, I'd say you would probably be doubling that, especially with their costs if they go up. So you're talking about 20 years, roughly $15,000 a year times 20 years. That's what you're paying to utilize somebody else's facility. So if you're going to justify the savings, you're not really saving if you're paying. And can we bring some of that money here to sustain the building here by allowing availability to other agencies?
Right. And those are the factors I would like to hear, because with the range, it's just not the cost, initial cost, it's the ongoing cost too. We had to go through and, actually do some maintenance on our range, and it wasn't very cheap. We're talking about the bullets going down range and all the things that you had to do. So those are the things that I would like to hear when you talk about those costs, is the cost comparisons and everything else like that, making sure that we are being cost effective, that's all. And let's see, next thing, anything else, anybody else on this?
I guess just one question or comment about maybe the scalability of the building, and kind of looking to Paul, going back to like when we built the Public Works highway maintenance facility, that obviously they're different buildings, but sort of the idea of knowing that you might have to expand it in the future, is that something that we would take into consideration? That
Campus is a little more difficult. The Public Works facility is pretty easy to have.
I mean, it's just
Had a space designated in the front for office addition, which hasn't been done yet, but then we added, it's easy to add more vehicle space. The problem with the police department is they got so disparate uses. You got investigation, you got control space, you can administrative staff. It's like an office building, you got just office workers. There's got so many varieties of things going on. It's just hard to add on to that. So I think it's something to look at, but it's more challenging. I've all been understand.
Yes.
The police building. It's not just pure office space. That's the problem.
Really, the way we're approaching it is more looking at future space needs and talking with the chief on what his future org chart's going to look like. How many future sworn officers are you going to have? And making sure that you have the space in this new building so that you're building it right the first time, and you're not gonna be occupying every single office day one, but the intent is that 20 or 30 years from now, you're not scratching your head going, I don't have an office for this person, but I need to hire them.
I think in some ways we've seen that with this campus, where I think we were trying to anticipate, but the city's also grown so much faster than people anticipated. So you think, I'm building this facility for 30 plus years, and then you find out, oh, now we're having to try to knock down a wall to expand a community center because it's undersized, even though we thought we were building for what was the need. Because the other question would be if you could just expound a little bit on the community partnerships aspect of it, because just kind of what you have envisioned in that, and certainly understanding that this facility being where you're located, it's not conducive at all to, I would think, to community partnerships to even know where to find you guys within this building.
Currently,
I have a question before the chief, just piggyback to what you're saying. Do we have a projection in terms of the population and what the staffing levels will be for the department for 20 years from now?
Yeah, we'll go through that when we go through the
Okay.
yes. Community, absolutely. Everybody brings up, and for me, it's kind of unique that everybody questions why, being Fitchburg right here, where are you going to get people from the community? Well, we're currently anywhere from 31 to 33,000, depending on who you ask, as far as population. Nonetheless, one thing that we can all agree is that the city's growing. The station is one where, again, part of the 21st century policing model is we have to push community-oriented policing, and there's many different ways that you do that. Part of it, and if our staffing levels allowed us to get to where we're at, we're short, is we on our on our budgeted, we would have two, we currently, if we were full staff, we would have 2 community resource officers. Most often, I don't know why we call them neighborhood officers here, but they're community resource officers. That's the way I was built, so I'm going to be changing that word back and forth. But that community resource officer is to constantly engage with the community, externally and internally, to use, to go out and find ways to meet with people out there, but also to welcome them to the building. And some of those things that, exercises that we could do here would be and I know they changed these words, so forgive me, I offend people by the words I'm using, but Citizens Academy. What do we call them now?
Madison went to Residence Academy.
Residence Academy. So forgive me if we're saying, well, but Residence Academy, to have these different exercises to promote. There's a growing Hispanic community in the city of Fitchburg. Coming from the department that I came from, there were holiday events, the Three Kings event, to host an event at the station, open house. There are a number of different exercises that you can do at your station to invite people to know where the station is. And part of that would also include the recruiting piece of it, to invite people from the community. Now, how you get them here, those are also a number of different ways that you can utilize. So for one to ask, how are you going to get the people here? That's part of the exercise in itself, is to find ways to get them here. We've had a number of different events throughout the year. One is a child seat awareness day. And if you were present at that, we hosted it this year at the Fire Station 1, and you have a large group of people that come. We hosted one at St. Joseph's Church on the north end. A large contingency of people will come. That's no different if you held it at a police facility station. If you use these exercises, you follow some of the models, best practices, you will get people to come to the facility for a community-oriented event. And our monthly, one thing we're doing now currently is a monthly crime awareness or Fitchburg awareness meeting. We do one. We don't have a facility here currently to house them, so we've been going throughout different aldermanic districts in the city to host those meetings. We've done them on the northwest, through the northeast, the central. Our last one was last Thursday at Black Hawk Church. So it's endless as the amount of things that you can do to make a community oriented, and we would like a facility that can accommodate that.
Okay, anything else before we move on? Okay, next, we're going to get a high-level overview of FGMA's approach to programming.
Thank you. So we started programming about 2 months ago. So at the end of May, we had our kickoff meetings. I think it was May 31st. So we definitely do an all-inclusive approach to programming. So we don't start with a cookie cutter formula. We try to gather as much data as we can. As Chief said, we got all sorts of reports, both digitally, printouts. So we gathered all that data. We sent out surveys, questionnaires to all the different departments and groups that will be in the new program. They filled it out for a week or so. We had, like I said, the kickoff meeting, we established what are the primary goals, not only for the building, the user groups, but what about sustainability? You know, how does this weave into the development of Fitchburg? We even started to get data from the planning and zoning department to understand, you know, what was last year and this year's population, you know, roughly 33,000 plus minus with 55 sworn. And then using chief and all sorts of information about the ratio, you know, there's all sorts of different data of how many officers per 1,000 residents. But we landed for purposes of comparing to the region from Middleton, Monona, all the others, of using 1.9 officers per 1,000 for our guide. So that would take us to a projection of 81 sworn officers for 20 years. So we're looking at 2043. Some of the reports that were done in May went out to 2035 for about 40,000 population, but we projected even a little bit further, 2043. So we were at like 42,651 just using some of the data, which at the 1.9 we're at 81. So it was really important to start with an understanding of staffing projections. The chief and deputy chief gave us all sorts of information. You know, it's easier to look at the 5-year plan and say, what are the needs, the hiring needs in 5 years? But of course, we wanted to push them even further and really look at the 20-year projection. Because as Andrew said, you want to understand what are the staffing potentials, not only for sworn patrol officers, but in your detectives, in, you know, record specialists, your dispatchers, even if there's cross-training between dispatch and records. So we wanted to understand all of that to make sure we knew how many bodies might be in this building in 2043. And not that you might be able to build everything. You know, we talk about short-term, mid-term, and long-term growth. So we try to build as much as the budget can afford. No, just for 20 years. I mean, we hope this building will be 30 to 40 years or longer, like a lot of our great old, governmental buildings. So we did all that in May and June. We came back at the end of June 26th, 27th, had some great 2 days of interviews with all the staff, went through the questions, wanted to verify program. And then for the last month, we've been developing a couple rounds of the program. So that's just the one graphic that I just wanted to share on the screen. Was just a high-level summary, which should be popping up here. So, and it's a live document, so we're already on to actually draft 3 today. But we've organized our program, this is the summary page, in 12 main categories. And it's just an easy way, and we use the org chart even, which we've been inheriting. So like the org chart, which is a living document as well. There is a 5-year, I'm not sure if it's sharing. I guess it's. So there's a 5-year program that has a whole vision of how they may change to a different setup with captains and who might be under what division. So it's really good to understand the vision of the department so we can organize our program. So the program was always kept an eye on 2015. The last program study that was done was over almost 8 years ago now. So in 2015, that study suggested just under 79,000 square feet. Now, it was a little bit different. It didn't have quite the vision of a large training wing like this. But, so there were, even though today's in yellow is actually where we are live as of just an hour ago. So what's interesting is we're pretty close with the big number that we were 8 years ago. It's just some of the philosophy of where you put that square footage has changed. So it's a little bit bigger indoor garage than maybe 8 years ago, or maybe it's a bit more training, or maybe evidence storage. Maybe we found a more compact way to do high-density vertical storage instead of all static shelving. So I think there's a lot in the mix here, but today's snapshot is that we're at about 78,000 square feet. And that does include the 3-part training wing. So as Chief has said a few times, we have that nice classroom theory component. You have the scenario tactical component where you could do arrest tactics, you could do virtual FATS training, and then that range, that would be a 10-lane, 25-yard indoor range. So that is part of this program as well. And we're trying to do sharing. So it's always important too, right, to prove to everyone that you are making every space do double or triple duty. So we had a lot of discussions already today saying, hey, if you're going to have these classrooms or training rooms, have small, medium, and larges and put them in a strategic location where maybe one door is to the public lobby and another door is to the back secured lobby. So some days it's a small community room with, important, easy access to the lobby. Other days you lock the lobby door and you have the access to the secured hallway. And so it's creative ways to try to do more with less, if possible. So that's where we are. So programming, we're almost done with programming. We've had about a month of programming. We had a great session today. After this, when we did this morning, then we had a fun block exercise where we took these program blocks and turned them into puzzle pieces. So literally we had everything at the same square footage. So we had the site plan at the same square footage. We had every department of patrol, range, records, investigations. And we had about an hour exercise where everyone could talk about what goes in the basement, what goes on the first floor, what goes on the second floor. So it's a great way to start design.
I have a question. Is this one, this programming is definitive, or we are still, can we make changes there?
It's not an approved final program. This is draft 3, so.
So who is gonna approve this, the council, or who is gonna approve the final draft? I have a question.
That's a good question. I think at some point the ad hoc committee will be approving that, unless you think it needs to go to council. I mean, the council will weigh in November, so I guess basically, let me back up. So the ad hoc committee will end up making a recommendation. The council will be reviewing this in November is the plan.
Okay.
And that would be at the schematic design level.
That's schematic design, right?
Yes.
So this square footage that you have highlighted there will accommodate our needs 20 years from now, probably, maybe.
Yes, that's the attempt.
That's the
That
attempt.
we always start, unless the budget starts driving it down, we try to come up with a square footage box that will reach a projected 20-year staff growth. Sometimes the budget just can't make it, and so we go back to like a 15-year staff projection, but this one today is reaching a 20-year staff projection. Now, who knows how quickly Fitchburg's gonna keep growing, so, this was based on I think 500, I know I've seen between 500 and 700, but this was 585 persons added per year in the comp plan. But anyway, this is still really good because you don't want to build a building where it's only accommodating today's staffing levels or even 5 years out.
And one more question. Let's say that there's something that we would like to have, but can't have this year because of money. The space will be there for that. Let's say, I'm just going to mention the range. I'm not saying I don't want it. But I'm just saying, let's say if that's, or the evidence for so we cannot have a bigger one that we need right now. The space will be there for us to expand that.
We try that. So we always like to master plan our campuses. So as much as we can build in day one, we do. And I know we only had an hour, so we didn't talk a lot about it. But it is very smart, even though, as Paul said, it's very tricky because the biggest areas of growth in every department, you have to think about evidence. How is evidence going to grow? And is that on an exterior wall where you could put an addition? And then patrol and detectives. So they're the two biggest that are linked to number of cases and population. So sometimes we actually stack patrol and investigations, first floor, second floor, so that there's a strategic two-story addition that you could grow. So there's a lot to go into master planning where maybe we don't put the staff parking or public parking right up to the building. Maybe we have a 30-foot buffer so that it is dashed in future master plan. So depending on what the budget can afford day one, if we're doing our job correctly, we would actually have a few dashed lines that says, hey, here's a strategic addition for evidence expansion, or here's a strategic two-story addition where the detectives and patrol could expand. Or if you don't get the range in day one, the range is a little bit trickier because one of our ideas is the range is on top of parking, because who wants to hear bullet sounds? You don't want to be in your office and hear that. So the range is really important. If the original idea was to put the range in the basement, you can imagine you have to build the basement day one. Now you could shell it out. We've actually done some where you shell out the range and the equipment of the range could come later. That could be anywhere from a $750,000 to $1 million package. So you could shell it out later and bring the equipment in the basement. But the range is probably one of the trickiest things. Is like, well, if you don't build it now, where does it fit in the master plan later? That's a little bit tricky, probably the trickiest one.
That was just an example.
Yeah.
It would be nice to have one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anything else? Okay, then.
I guess based on the property and evidence size, I assume the intent would still be to use for large pieces, to use the facility that's down on Fish Hatchery.
Right. As the city grows and as more serious criminal investigations continue, there's a statute of limitations for no process cases to keep evidence, and then the process cases. So your evidence is only going to grow and not allow the ability to release things. The facility over there, although we do have a secure area, there's even struggles with that. There's a roof that needs to be replaced, and then there's again, these are just added things that come with the cost, but that one's more for vehicles, vehicular homicides and things of that nature, to house that type of big item product objects. Here is going to be your day-to-day, your drugs, your firearms, your items taken in a domestic violence investigation or things like of that nature, which are easier packaged. I forgot to mention the drying room for soiled objects, things of that nature. Your in-house facility will accommodate those things.
What's going to happen with the old building? Old building, the one that's here.
The one here will be repurposed for City Hall. City Hall employees, we've outgrown, everyone basically is out of this building with the exception of fire. And if you, I don't know if you walk next door, there is basically no room. Everybody's sitting in cubicles in the hallway. So we here at City Hall have outgrown this area. Downstairs will be taken over by one of the department heads or multiple department heads will take over that area. So in other words, we're being kicked out one way or another.
Okay.
But this building is almost 25 years old. By the time that happens, we've got 25 years out of this building, which is not that bad.
Anything else? Okay, I guess next on the agenda is the review of draft project budget, Pepper Construction.
Any more on the programming first?
No, I think
Do you want any more detail on the program? That's all we're going to do on that.
Yeah, I think we're just going to stay high level.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, so we created an early project budget. We matched revision 2, I believe, is the one before we started modifying earlier today. So the budget reflects 78,397 square feet. That has since come down roughly a couple hundred square feet. So it is not as current as the square footage, but we will get that updated. Kind of high level right now, everybody likes to go to the very bottom. Project cost without owner soft costs, we're at $38.9 million. That includes a couple notable things such as, we're at 15% contingency, there's no drawings. There's really no narratives, so very high level schematic, not even schematic, I would just say high level budget. At this point, we have 5% escalation baked into that number, so this is priced in today's dollars, knowing that this will bid in about 15 months or so, or 12 months, I'm sorry, next August. So we've included 5% escalation for material costs between today's dollars and next August. We do have a large amount set aside for some sustainability initiatives. That could be geothermal, that could be some solar. It's not a full lead build included in this estimate. We have $2.5 million included to kind of address some of those sustainability initiatives. And then, the soft costs at the bottom there would be owner-provided materials. That would be the design fees to get the full project budget up to $44.1 million currently. That would be all in. And, again, we have some assumptions made. As the design progresses, we can start to dial this in a little bit better.
Yeah, I have a concern. The budget that we approved is $35 million.
I understand.
So, and I think this is the budget that the council will approve tomorrow night for the, so I don't know. I know that things can be expensive, construction costs are going up. My question is, we need to build a police station that we can afford too as a city.
Understood.
So, I want to make the comment that number for each you have.
Could you scroll up? I want to see what's on the top half of this document.
Can you share that with us?
Yeah,
Okay.
I can send it around. You want me to zoom in a little bit?
Okay. So this doesn't include the specialized equipment that needs to go into the building? Or is that
That's below the line. So we came up with the construction budget, and then we added the below the line items here to get you to the all-inclusive 44.1.
So that's the owner FF&E. So that's, you know,
What is
you
that?
need new desk in there, you're gonna need specialist equipment.
Freezers, heating, drying rooms.
Projection screens,
So why you don't include that in there?
because usually that is paid for direct by the owner. That's not part of your construction costs. Usually the owner would coordinate and have all that. You don't want to pay the markups for a construction person to do that work. So usually it's contracted direct.
So that's the 2,800,000?
The
2.4 million.
2.4?
The 2.8 is more the
The 2.8 is the design and the construction management. And there's some other engineering costs, you get survey, geotechnical work, and
material testing.
material testing, miscellaneous things like that.
Yeah.
But primarily it's architect and construction manager. So basically the owner FF&E is basically if you pick up the building and shake it, anything that falls out, that falls under that. That's somebody,
Anything not bolted down.
so the contractor's building everything that's bolted down, everything else is kind of loose.
What is that $1 million fee?
So that's when the general contractor would build the project, that's their profit and overhead. We just simulated as us, you know, if we were to bid this job, that we put 3% in there. Really that varies, you know, when you go out to bid, that depending on the contractor, how much work they're looking for. We wanted to accommodate for something in there because you know somebody's gonna include it. Now what that number specifically is depends on that contractor's workload at that time.
So did you discuss, I mean, so now we have 35 million and this is 44. So when you did your projections, did you take that into account? No, you just did it without thinking without knowing how much money we have to spend?
Yeah, we built it off the program, and then because we don't want to come here and just tell you, yeah, it's 35, and then when you go to put the shovel on the ground, it's 40. I mean, we
Okay.
want to start with the right number the first time. So knowing that the budget was 35, we still are going to show you what we think it is, so you don't get too far.
So this is 44, it doesn't mean that next year we are here again and say, you know what, we are short. So how high can be that number, 44?
Well, we got the escalation fee in there, which is 5%. So that 20% for contingency and escalation.
Yes,
there's
20%?
There's
Yes,
five.
right.
Of that 20%, 5% is to deal with potential cost increases from today to when we bid the project next year.
Right.
So if inflation goes down, then we'll have a little bit there. If it goes the other way, if it's higher than 5%, then we'll be short.
Well, inflation is going down, so, you know.
Yeah, so we're putting 5% basically for inflation. Well, yeah, inflation for consumer goods is different than inflation in construction. I mean, they don't always track. So.
If I can mention for the record, there was a space needs study completed in 2016. A little history on the $35 million. I believe in 2016, $35 million was the number to come up to build this facility in 2016. This was shelved for a number of years and was brought back up now by council. So the number $35 million, that came up in 2016 and just was again shelved. So we're revisiting this now in 2023 to work with that number. And yes, it went back down to 25, and this year we came up with another 10 million, bringing it back by 35. But the number 35, the $35 million originally came up in 2016. So we're working off of the $35 million that was budgeted in 2016 for a space needs study that was completed in 2015. And we're going almost on 10 years now without acting on it.
But is this
It
bottom
was
line?
25, I was part of that committee and it was $25 million and then it was increased 10 million and then when decreased 25, but initially it was $25 million.
Then increased 10 million.
Then increased 10 million in 2019 and then 2020 it went down to 25 and now we increased it to $10 million more. So that, but it was 25 in the beginning, Chief.
So we went up and down. Okay, we went up and down again.
But is this the bottom line, what we have?
From the council, I mean, that would have, we have to
From the
discuss
city.
that in council.
Are you allowed to ask questions?
We would rather just have the committee do it. We will have public input, but it's a quick question.
It is a quick question, and I was going through the contract, and it seemed like there was things that were not covered by the estimate, like a backup generator, heating, air conditioning, the specialized equipment for that. Is that like a separate line item that we research and then we put in? Does the 44 million cover that?
Yeah, that's included in the construction costs.
So it includes a backup generator?
Yeah, where did the generator comment come from? Where the exclusion?
If you have a building and it's emergency services and responders and a 911 center, you need a backup generator.
But I guess where did you find that it wasn't in this?
Well, it just seemed like it said certain things were not included in the contract that was up. I'm sorry, I don't mean to disrupt your meeting.
Are you talking about the CMA contract?
Yeah, those contracts that were put up for the,
Because that would have been part of the general prime contractor contract, not the CMA.
That's really a different issue you need to take offline, that's not.
okay, thank you.
You done?
Well, this might not be right, but I'm just saying how flexible, you gave us the budget.
Yes.
How flexible are you guys to accommodate our needs within our budget? Plus or minus $2 or $3 million. Can you work with us if we don't have the?
Well, let's back up. Pepper's role is not building. They will not be building the project, and they're not still performing the work. They're strictly here as an advisor. They're telling us if we go out to bid, other contractors like Pepper, this is what the cost will be.
Oh,
Pepper will not be building. Their two primary roles is through the design process to give us estimates, update that. So as we go through the design, their schematic designs, design development, bidding documents, Pepper will be updating this estimate as we go along.
3 times. Yeah.
3 times.
So-
And then once it's bid, Pepper's more of an oversight role to make sure that the building's built according to our specifications. So
So we would be the buffer between the city of Fitchburg
And-
and the contractor who would actually be out there with the shovels in the ground.
But this amount, is pretty much set.
No,
No.
it'll be
It
set
could go up.
once the contract is signed after the bids.
But it could go up or down.
Yes.
until you get a signed contract, and
Okay.
you really, even then, you don't know what the final cost is until the project is completed. Because there'll be things that come up during construction. That's why you carry contingency, because there's
Okay.
things that, as you go through construction, you'll see things, oh, we should have done this or done that. So
Right.
there's, hopefully you get most of this, identified through design. There's always some things that'll come up during construction that,
Okay.
but, so to answer your question, you never know what the project's gonna truly cost till you write your last check, but
So at this point,
it just gets more refined as you go.
there are 2 ways to reduce that number at this point in the design process. One of them is to reduce your overall square footage, which goes counter to a goal we just discussed of making this build it right the first time. The second would be decreasing the quality of materials that you're using. If you're doing that, again, counter to building it right the first time, because yes, you're going to reduce that number, but you're going to drastically increase the number you're spending over the life of the building.
And one of the examples of material, again, with after 2020 and even before that, is contamination, soil objects. The going material is stainless steel, or when you come in, things that you're going to inventory, or you've been inventorying to prevent the spread of any bacteria or germs, and that's something that we, would like to, or actually it would be something that is more mandated now than ever with the spread of disease as easy as it goes.
It's also the durability of those materials. So this is a 24/7 operation out of this facility, so there's never going to be a time where it's not used and kind of shuts down overnight like a city hall would. These guys are using it every day, all day, and those materials do degrade over time, so we try to build in not necessarily the best materials that money can buy, but good quality materials that are going to last the city of Fitchburg a long time, so that you're not having to constantly go in there and retrofit and replace.
Good, Mayor.
So my question is, you said sustainability allowances. That one includes geothermal, solar.
It's just that right now it's an allowance to identify that there's going to be some sustainability
Okay.
initiatives in the project.
Okay.
And I'm one that want to see it built the right way. It's been my experience, and I'll go back to Madison. We build these stations, and all of a sudden, you know, we could try to do it on the cheap, and then we're just busting out. You know, it happened with the South District, happened with the West District, and because of the West District, then we had to go back and build one, the Midtown Station on Mineral Point Road. And we also got to lay it, we don't know how society's going to change. You know, we got to be looking at, you know, our transgender officers, and I mean, we're looking at different things now that we may not be able to correct once this building is built. And one thing I don't want to see, I'm glad the chief mentioned lactation rooms, is that all of a sudden it's built and our female officers do not have a place where they can go and actually do what they need to do to take care of their family. So for me, you know, if this is what is actually needed, then, I mean, I'm just like, it is what it is. But to try to go on the cheap, I think that's the bad way to go, because we're going to be back again when that building gets filled, and, you know, I think it's just going to cost more. So I'm just like, let's just concentrate. I'm one, you know, people know me. I'm kind of a...
I'm just thinking about the money. The $35 million is there for this. And this could go up and down a few millions. Who knows? Hopefully it won't go up from that. So we can still proceed with doing the plan that you guys have proposed, the square footage that we have, the materials that we should use. And as far as the city, I mean, there might be some things that we cannot put in the building right away, but we could have the space to put it in
To some extent.
to some extent.
Yes, but we would have to know that ahead of time so that we can plan for that.
So when is that time?
To know what you want in the building and what you want out, but
Yeah.
very soon.
Very soon,
Well,
when?
Some of it is a series of ad alternates too. So, I mean, I think a lot of projects are strategic. If you can have at bid day a series of ad alternates, and a lot of times, you guys would probably agree, they're things that are very flexible. They're site related or rooftop related. So when does that perimeter security fence come in? Or when does covered parking or solar panels or a green roof? Things that are not going to affect the heart of the inside of the building. Now, that's not going to maybe add up to millions of dollars, but usually we've done past projects where you can come up with an ad alternate list for all bidders, or deduct, however you want to do it, that gives you that little buffer zone at bid day. So if you're like, gosh, I'm nervous, you know, if you know you have $1 million+ of add or deduct alternates, that really does give the city and everyone a little bit more comfort.
I've seen that done with exteriors, you know, all brick, sub it out, put siding in, you know, kind of change, give some flexibility to the city to decide, do we want to spend the extra money for a brick facade, or do we just want siding? You know?
But some of those might just be through the design development estimate, because you can imagine you don't want to go to bid day with the design team drawing double details of everything.
Well, that and some of that is dictated by Fitchburg Center that we can't deviate from.
Oh, sure.
And planning commission too.
Yeah.
But if there's heat tracing and pavement, I mean, I remember that was another project, snow melt. Those are things, those are nice haves, but maybe not musts on day one. So we could definitely together help develop a list of those ad or deduct.
You brought up some words that I'd like to hear. Must have, need to have. And can you break it down that way? You know, because, I mean, I look at this committee as just we're going to make a recommendation to the council, and who knows what's going to happen as far as budget is concerned. So it'd be nice to say, okay, here's what the chief priorities were, you know, that must have, need to have, and would like to have. It'd be nice to kind of break it
My
down.
question is about the shooting range. So that one is for me, it's an accessory that, you know, it's not like a necessity. So how much that is going to add to the building? And I would like to know if we need to do it eventually, not now, but then we can do it in maybe 5-10 years. How we can add that to the project, and but the idea is I would like to know how much it's going to cost that. how much
Yeah.
is adding to that $44 million that should be raised?
Absolutely. That's something with Jared and Pepper, we were totally gonna, we knew that was a big targeted item. So in future estimates, we probably would have a range, separate number. And even, Chief, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but just coming off 3 projects where we've just gone through these cost things, and range is always a hot topic. We went through the DD estimate to reconcile the budget. It wasn't that they were going to lose it altogether, but in another project in Texas, the 10 lanes went down a couple. It went down to 8 or 7. And so maybe it's not perfect, but to at least have a certain number of lanes and still save $1 million or $500,000, at least for that project, that was something that the chief and the key stakeholders decided that was the way to go forward. So we could definitely not only, like Jared said, you're going to have an SD estimate and a DD estimate. Those are the 2 crucial ones. The value of the range, or we can figure out, is it just the range or how much of the training wing gets broken out? We can have it as a true built-out 10-lane range. Is it a shelled-out range? Because you can build the shell and put in all the range equipment later, so that's kind of guaranteeing you have the box. Or you could go down to 8 lanes or 7 lanes.
The range, I have to say it's important. Officers need to maintain that standard. But I was going to ask you, why did we think of 10 lanes? What was the rationale behind that? Because you're right, we could go down to lower number of lanes and it might still work. I don't know if 10, it's because that's based on the number of officers that would be using the range?
Exactly. It's based on in talking and working with the police department, understanding what their future growth is going to look like, what their training program is going to look like 20, 30, 40 years out, and making sure that we're accommodating the number of officers that they need to train at any given time in that range space. We actually just went through a very similar exercise with a client in the Fox Valley. They have a similar problem. Their training facility is at Fox Valley Fox Valley Technical College, excuse me. And that's another one that everybody's booking up all the time. So theirs was a little different. They had their police department that more or less suits their needs, but they didn't have the training component.
I just want to mention it's, we're coming down and we're looking, just as the chief of police, in being, working with police departments for 30 years, the range becomes a hot topic, right? But it's a need. And again, I keep talking about accountability, but we're right away, for some of the conversations here, let's take away the accountability piece. But that's accountability and training and accountability. But what do we want to take away? The accountability piece. Well, the accountability is going to be there, and I keep saying it because here's the thing with the range. If the minimum would be 10, and this is why I say that, because the way the ranges are built now are not one lane where you stand in between a partition and you shoot like you did in the 1970s. Now it's an open area where, again, because of the change in the dynamics in firearm and active shooters and moving targets, it requires you to move, and so on and so forth. So to have an open area, you would need to, a 10-lane range is really more like a 7-8 person because of the shapes of our bodies and the ability to move. It's not as wide as one would think it is. So either you're going to build it, the minimum would probably be 10, and you would have groups of 30, but 8 at a time, 10 at a time to get in there. So just to give you the optics of what a range looks like, 10 is not really big. It's going to accommodate. So now when you're talking about training needs, the way Dane County is set up, Fitchburg is one of 5 cities that collaborate together, part of an MOU. So you have amongst those 5 cities, Verona, Monona, Sun Prairie, and Middleton, and Fitchburg, each one of us in different groups based on size train together. That's where you get your numbers. So it's not just Fitchburg. Fitchburg trains with Middleton. Verona trains with Monona. And if you were to use an area, we're looking at cost of things where maybe this would sustain itself. I brought up the amount of money that Fitchburg spends just on training facilities alone. That's $12,000 to $15,000 and growing. We also, for fitness, per contract, we're paying over $10,000 in YMCA fees. That's a contract fee for the union, but when you put all of this together, $10,000 and $15,000, you're like at $25,000, $30,000 a year with the projected growth of the department that you're spending just on training area, not what you pay to send people to officers to other areas, other schools for training. So that's, again, you're talking about a large number there that you would need it. And I think we really got to consider in law enforcement the accountability piece. If we're taking out training portions, what are we really saying about accountability in law enforcement if we can't really have an area to train? When you send people out there, it becomes now a staffing issue where you can have it in-house and still accommodate staffing needs.
And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that a range is not needed in accountability. I'm just looking at the ranges that we have locally. I mean, if we need a range, we need a range. But I just want to make sure that, if we can't get into those spaces and having one of our own, I think that's fine. And, I think if we're all going to train together with the other municipalities, then I think you got to come up with a cost that, they're going to have to, chip in.
Oh, I've already talked to them. They pay this to Madison as well. Mm-hmm. So that money will start coming our way to help.
What is the cost of the range in the budget?
We don't have that specifically broken out at this point.
Break that out.
But we can work on breaking that out.
That's probably around 3 or 4 million. If you take the square footage times 500, it's, in that range, it's around.
And that includes everything with the air quality and exhaust, everything.
And all of the bullet-resistant panels and all of that, yeah.
But also we need to have staffing too, we need to have some personnel there monitoring that.
Well,
That
that comes from the sworn officers that are already on staff.
Our staff. So it's not open 24/7. It gets scheduled. So we have certified instructors that we train. So it's Middleton. So when we train with Middleton, their officers and our officers are certified. Certainly not all, but they're certified and trained in those fields. Our deputy chief is a certified instructor. He's also at a higher level for the state to coordinate these efforts.
Chief, I have a question that I've heard this from a lot of other chiefs around the state, some that actually have their own ranges. Comes down to accountability, liability, officers handling their own weapons. What I've heard from other chiefs is that when you have your own range, they're more comfortable with their own weapon, they're handling it more often versus when you're scheduling 2 or 3 times a year. So is that something that you see
Absolutely.
a benefit?
Absolutely benefit. I can give you examples, but some of it is just too much for public internal needs. Accidental discharges, they do happen. And we have them. So I don't want to get too much detail. Those are internal measures where we handle them. It's easy to now go downstairs and retrain for that accidental discharge. It's unfortunate, but when you're handling your firearm just simply from getting dressed to putting your firearm, those things happen. The more you practice, again, the accountability piece, again, that's where I go back to accreditation, muscle memory. And if you could continue to practice, or you're able to deal with an accidental discharge per se for this conversation immediately, that's going to resolve the issue a lot quicker than having those repeated.
Chief, could you tell us how much range time you need for training each year? What's the state standard for that? I know there's the number, you may not have it, but if we could get that number too sometime, that'll work.
Let me see if it's on this sheet.
Because I thought is it 4 times a year? Or?
Minimum standard would be something like of that nature.
Okay.
Yes.
I have another question for you guys. So does the insurance increase when you have a range in the facility? Or is it the same?
Believe.
Yeah, I don't know. That's what we'd have to ask our insurance.
Yeah.
We'd have to ask our insurance carrier.
Because it would be great to have all those numbers too.
I'm going to do a time check. It's like 4 o'clock, and we have one more item to go over. this part. Well, pretty sure we'll be back at it again when we get some more numbers. And before we move on, Jared?
Yes.
Could you just give us an overview of what your company's role is? Because that did come up in a council meeting.
Yeah, so we'll be hand in hand with FGM here, kind of working through the programming. Like we said, we'll produce 3 estimates. That's phase 1 of the contract. So SD, DD, CD, each time those documents roll
I
out.
want you to explain those initials.
Oh, I'm sorry. Schematic design, sorry, I'm going. Schematic design, right, that'd be very high level, kind of floor plans, layouts. We'll put a budget together on it. Design development, kind of we get a set of specifications, a little more detail. We'll put a budget to it. And then CDs is construction drawings. That's before that would go out to bid to all the general contractors who would pursue the work. So that's phase 1 of our contract. Phase 2 would be, well, there's a little bit of a transition there where we'll procure the bidding for the project, do a site visit, we'll level the bids for the city of Fitchburg, make our presentation for award, provided it comes in under budget, the project goes forward. That kicks off phase 2, where we would then oversee the construction of the general contractor for the city of Fitchburg. We wouldn't necessarily be here every day, but pretty close to it, managing the day-to-day construction, change orders that come up, all of the ongoing day-to-day stuff. We would be working with the general contractor, FGM, and the city of Fitchburg. We would not physically be building anything under this contract. It would just be all kind of CM advisory type role.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. So next is the review and comment on the project schedule. Do you have that, Paul, the schedule, or Andrew? You do?
Let me share it right now. If I can. Doesn't want to cooperate, but hopefully everybody can read that. So where we are today is toward the end of programming here. So we're at this ad hoc committee meeting. We're hoping that in the short term we'll have approval of the program and moving forward into schematic design, starting that next month. And that will run through November, culminating in, as Paul mentioned earlier, approval from the city of Fitchburg, whether that's at the council level, at the committee level. I'll let you guys decide that. There's a series of public presentation meetings as part of that. We know there's kind of varying different entities with interest in this project. So whether it's the committee here, Fitchburg Center Committee, City Council, and then once we have approval there, in November we move into design development. So as Jared was mentioning, at each of these, there will be that budget check. Design development, we get a little more detailed, we'll start to understand some more of the materials, and fleshing out what the building's really looking like. Again, we'll have some public meetings toward the end of that, which will be projected in mid to late February of 2024. We will go through construction documents starting February, ending mid to late summer of 2024. And then that bidding phase really reflects not only the open bid process, but then also the contracts and procurement and approval and all of that. And then we'll move into construction administration for us. For Pepper, that would be the construction manager as advisor. And that's really the biggest moving target right now is the duration of that. And we'll get a better handle on that as we get through some of these design phases and understand what materials we're using, and what the lead times on those materials are. And that's a big part of what Jared and his team will be working with us on, informing, what are the real-time long lead items, and can we mitigate some of the impact by changing to a different material type or something like that. So that that September 24 through April of 26 timeframe. That's really the biggest moving target because at this point we don't really know what those long lead items might be and how long the lead times would actually be once we get there.
So when do you, okay, let me just clarify. So when do you need an answer on that this is going to be a goal? Is that the September 24th you're talking, or September 24th?
Well, so right now we're in this, toward the end of programming here. So program approval, I think would also be approval of the initial budget, because without that initial budget approval, if you're saying it has to be 35 million, then we're gonna have to find a way to cut, like I said, either the materials or the size of the building, or both. Yeah, or a combination of the two. If we're going to do that, that's something we need to know before we move into schematic design, because we don't want to have to be doing redundant design where we get so far down the line, you guys say, oh no, it's 35 million, you got to backtrack all the way back to the beginning and start over.
I have a question. So if we have to, decide it right now what is the program, the final design, why we're having all these meetings in February, you know what I mean? So what are those meetings if we already decided to have them?
We haven't designed anything yet. So you're not approving final design at all. What you're approving is the size of the building at a little north of 78,000 and the initial budget of 44.1.
But this is the problem is that the council has a $35 million number. So we are going to 44 million. I don't think that this committee can decide that.
Oh, I'm saying the city as a whole needs to make that decision.
Yeah.
So whatever the process is to make that decision is what we need to know before moving forward into design.
So my question is, why we are going to go next year to bid in this project? Why it takes so long? You know what I mean? Why we cannot accelerate that process?
Because there's a whole, like you can see in there, there's a whole host of meetings that have to happen to understand exactly what goes into this building as far as materials, as far as systems. All of that needs to be engineered and designed, because right now it's just numbers in a spreadsheet. So there's not even lines on a page yet.
On that topic, I'm just curious, in contract talks, was there any talk potentially about multiple bid packages or an early release package for like generators or switch gears or
We
something?
did talk about it, but did not include it.
Generally, the city's preference normally is that one contract, because it gets this finger pointing thing going.
Okay.
But I mean,
I was just trying to answer the question that's a common way to try to speed up a little bit of the process.
But it wouldn't speed it up to the point of
No.
bidding it out a year before this
it's
timeline.
not uncommon. I mean, actually, this is pretty aggressive. This is a large building to get designed in 12 months. There's a lot of, I'll show you the plans when they're done. I mean, it's pretty, there's a lot of, it's pretty detailed. There's a lot to it. It's very complex. Especially the heating and ventilating systems are just
so
very complex.
we do.
So line 10, I guess that is the question, right? Like, should that be renamed preliminary program and budget approval? Because if we're going to launch into a critical 60 days of schematic design, I mean, that's a lot of effort that we kind of have to know if we're designing towards 70,000 or towards 40 million or 43, right? I mean, to have some preliminary reassurance.
Yes.
Any other questions?
Just I'm gonna, in terms of time frame, do you take into account the delay in getting materials, especially now that we've been having this issue with the low supply?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was saying in that construction phase. Right now, that's a moving target because we don't know, for example, Jared, I think electric switch gear is probably the longest one, which is at a year plus. So that's why that construction timeframe, not only does it take a long time to build the building, but it's also getting the sequencing right and making sure that you have materials on site to do what you need to do when you need to do it.
Are things back to normal in that respect or not?
Not on the electrical side of things. Roofing's getting better. Electrical parts are still very much a problem. But that's part of our role here is to work with the design team to, potentially procure something early if we had to. I mean, to make it work with the schedule. We'll be looking, Andrew said, for some of those long lead items to say, hey, like, we may need to think about an alternate option to get this moving to keep the project on track.
So any other issues, or is there an adjustment to the schedule that you can foresee right now?
At this point, I agree with Paul. I think it seems reasonable but pretty aggressive.
Okay. Announcements. Tentative next meeting is October 10th, 2023. Do you have a time yet for that? Do you have a time for that yet, Paul?
Yes, just a second, I'll let you know. We are scheduled for 3 o'clock in this room, October 10th.
All right.
It's a Tuesday.
Tuesday the 10th.
Tuesday, October 10th, at 3 o'clock.
October.
Oh,
Okay. Well, unless there's anything else, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you for everybody. A lot of decisions.